honey, sugar, yeast, salt. I like to put in a little caraway seeds for flavor, and of course whole wheat flour, and then a little bit of white flour, which adds a little bit of buoyancy to the bread, and just a measuring cup. And in a moment I'll show you how to do different aspects of the bread making. A first step is what is called proofing the yeast. So all I'm going to do is add this little bit of sugar. You can use just regular white sugar. A little bit won't kill you. Move the camera over there. Just kind of make sure that this sugar dissolves in this warm water that I just got out of the sink. And then you take this, which is a standard Fleischmann's active dry yeast, which you can get almost anywhere, or just about any kind will do, and you take the package and you pour it in. And this kind of gets the yeast started, and also make sure that your yeast was healthy, because you don't want to make the bread and have the yeast not be good, and then you basically wasted it. So then you just give it a little mix, make sure it's going, and then you just set it aside, and you wait a little while until it starts getting bubbly, which I'll show you in a few minutes, and then you can go on to the next step. For this bread, it'll be about a 1 cup water to 4 or 5 cups of flour by the time we're done with it. And so these are kind of the ratios as I'm using by eye for making things. This is kind of important to learn because things change based on season and altitude. So getting used to the feel of your bread and just looking at what you want to use. Sometimes you don't have milk available, you use an egg. You use no milk, you use something else. You don't have honey, you use sugar, different kind of oil. And you can make all sorts of different kinds of things and experiment. So it's kind of good to just get a sense of this. So I'm just going to show you about by eye what I do to make the bread. So first take a little bit of olive oil. Drip it right into this bowl here. Maybe a little much, but we'll see how the bread turns out. I kind of like it. The olive oil gives a really nice flavor, but you don't want to end up using too much, otherwise it can end up destroying the ability for the bread to form bonds and really get that buoyance that's really nice in a good bread. The next bit, you'll want to add a little bit of honey, because it's very nice and tasty. Once again, not an absolutely necessary step, a little more. Some recipes call for a good bit. I don't like that overly sweet thing going on in my bread, but if you were going to make a challah, you could have added a lot of honey, and that gives it a little bit of that classic sweet challah bread taste. Next, you want to give that a bit of a stir first. I always like trying to mix up the oil and sugar a little bit before doing things. Then you just add a dollop of milk. Once again, not necessary, but it gives the bread a little bit of a telltale texture that we can be used to a lot of the time. Yeah, it looks kind of funny, don't worry about it, it all blends in. Salt to taste, once again, it's another personal preference thing. Believe it or not, average bread oftentimes has a decent bit of salt, which kind of really brings out the flavor. And when you have nice whole wheat flour, it's good to bring out that nuttiness. Given that it's making such a big bread, even though that looked like a bunch of salt, really it's spread out and it's not that big a deal. So, alright, the next step would be to start adding a little bit of water, which I will do in one moment. So, as you can see, this is what happened to our yeast mixture, which means it's good and healthy. And a lot of recipes don't tell you to do this, but I like to add it right in order to mix with everything, to make sure it gets a good mix before I start adding flour. And note the amount of water you used for the yeast. Though it will be an overall by eye thing as you're getting used to making the bread, you want to get used to the feel for how much water you did to about how much flour. And so, starting with half a cup measure at a time. I'm going to start adding some flour. Sorry, I got a bit of a text message as I was doing that other bit, and so I had to start the video again. Just keeping track, about a half a cup. Start adding it in. So this is how it's looking after adding about another half a cup of water and about 3 cups of flour total, 1/2 cup being the white flour. And as you see, it's kind of lumpy and there's bunches of other flour around, but the dough is actually pretty sticky. And as you start moving it around more, it's going to pick up all this excess flour and it's actually going to continue to get sticky. And you want to keep on doing this till it kind of gets this texture where it's kind of nice and bouncy, and you can kind of move it around without it being overall too sticky. And so what you're going to need to do actually is adding little bits, pinches more flour to get that right texture. It should just barely stick to your hands, like this right here on my thumbs. Too sticky right now, but I'm going to keep rolling it around in this flour, and it's eventually actually going to pick up everything along the sides of this bowl here. And this is not even the kneading step. This is just still forming the dough. And really it doesn't matter too much how much a drop extra water that ends up being added, a drop extra flour. You can always balance. It just ends up diluting those original ingredients a bit, but it really shouldn't matter that much. So I'm going to continue doing this until it forms into the right ball, and then we get into the kneading stage. So as you can see, after adding just a little bit more flour, the bread is nearly just right. And you can pretty much start coming on to the kneading stage of it. It's still a little bit sticky, but as you see, it picked up everything from inside the bowl there. And you're just going to need to sprinkle a little bit of extra flour onto it along the way. And really, you don't need to add too much. Just a little bit like that. And just start kneading a bit. And start seeing what happens. It should pick it up, and then just along the way, don't be shy to add the flour. As long as that bread has that nice consistency and an ever so slight stickiness, you know you're okay and you're not overdoing it. It is possible to need to add even up to a whole extra cup of flour, so don't really worry about it. And just start kneading through it. And the way you'll knead for about 5 minutes, not really too much. You want to actually make folds in the bread and press. And fold and press. People underestimate this process because recipes just say knead for a few minutes and they'll just go like this. Okay, I kneaded the bread. But really what's happening is you're creating strands within the protein fibers of the bread, which are really important to allowing the yeast to do its work. Kind of like building columns or filling up a balloon. So you can go through this for a few minutes, just till the bread gets this, you'll notice a definite change in texture. It'll get this sense of what they call elasticy. And it's pretty sticky. As you see, it's hard to take my hand off of it. So I'm going to add this bunch more flour and just let it pick it up along the way. And I'll show you what it's like when it's ready to go. So just keep on doing it just like that. So as you can see, our bread is looking pretty good. It has that nice elastic quality. I really did add about a whole extra cup of flour along the way to keep that stickiness away. And I worked in a few caraway seeds just for some nice flavor. That's an option. You can do that if you want, add more or less. It's up to you. You can add little seeds, sesame seeds, whatever you want at that point, and just kind of work it in while you're kneading. And as you can see, it's not really sticking too much to the side of the bowl, which is good. It's a nice round mass that gives a little bit of resistance when you push it. And that's about it. The main thing you're going to need to do now is let it rise. And what you'll need to do is add a drop of oil to your bowl, like I just did, and kind of coat the bread with it. So you can see it in the light. Coat the bread. Because when it rises, it's going to rise a good bit. And it's actually going to get kind of moist again. And if you don't have this bit of oil, it's going to start sticking to the side of the bowl and slow down the rising process. It's just a little bit to coat the bread. And you kind of just put it in the center there. And you can grab a towel or a clean dishcloth, like I have right here, and just put it right over the top of your bowl, just like that, and put it aside for about an hour or so to rise, preferably in a nice warm place. It's a good chance to clean things up. And you don't even need to preheat the oven yet, because there's a whole other rising time that goes into this, and you can just wait, so you can go do something else for a while. It's also fine to leave it for a couple hours if you want, and then just come back and do something. It's the kind of thing you can even, go to work and come back. You don't want to let it rise too long, though, otherwise it can overdo, but it's really not a big deal, and worst case you learn something and experiment. So I'm going to come back in about an hour and show you what this looks like. Alright my friends, so this is the exciting part when you get to see how much it's risen. So you remember what it looked like before, and now, voila, much bigger, very nice and fluffy to the touch. And now there's basically just one more stage. You can start preheating the oven, and you want to push it down and actually remove a lot of that air. So you see, look at that oil helped a lot. Kind of just put it together, and then you're basically going to shape it onto whatever pan or tray you're going to use. So have a little baking sheet just like this, and you can lightly flour the surface of the sheet or not. It all depends on what kind of sheet you have. I know this one's pretty good, so you don't even really need to do it that much, but just a little sprinkle of flour over the top, and then you take your bread and you shape it, and you can put it right onto the sheet. So I'm going to stop a sec and give it a good shape and then show you what it looks like. Nice ball of bread. Now it's going to spread out a lot on this sheet. You can simply put it in a loaf pan or what have you, and do whatever you'd like. You can even sprinkle a few caraway seeds on or whatnot. But it now needs to rise again for about another 30 minutes. So I'm just going to probably invert this bowl right on top of the baking sheet, keep it covered, and just put it aside while the oven's warming up. And in about another 35, 40 minutes, I'm just going to pop it in the oven for about 25 or 30 minutes, and it'll come out. And I'll show you what that looks like when it's all done. Just thought I'd give you a quick look before I put it in the oven. And there it is. It rose after being under the bowl, and in it goes. And my friends, after a solid 25 minutes, this is the bread. It's still pretty hot, so pick it up. One way you can check, turn it around, have that nice hollow sound, you know it's done. Otherwise you can leave it in a little bit. Not going to be too bad either way, as long as you let it cool and cook. Cooling off is part of the process, so don't cut it yet. I'm going to transfer it over to a wire rack and give it about 5 or 10 minutes and then give it a shot. And I hope you enjoyed this little bread making tutorial. Notice how it came out really nice and wide and flat, but really nice and fluffy too. I kind of like my bread this way, but you're welcome to put it in a loaf pan, cook it a little longer, and enjoy it that way. So I hope you enjoyed. See you later.